Let me tell you something about cages. A cage does not make an animal weak. It makes it patient. And if you are not careful, it makes it clever. I learned that lesson the hard way. And so did the rest of the galaxy. My name is Arjun Malhotra. I was a commander in the United Earth Navy, which sounds impressive until you realize that the United Earth Navy no longer exists. It was dissolved 60 years ago, not because we lost a war, but because the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to have one. When humanity made first contact, we were thrilled. We had spent centuries staring at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there. Turns out, everyone was out there. 312 species, all part of a massive political body called the Galactic Compact, governed by an ancient council, known as the Conclave of Elders. They had rules for everything: trade, travel, territorial boundaries, the proper temperature for diplomatic tea. They welcomed us in with open arms and warm speeches. For about 15 years, it was wonderful. Then they passed Resolution 7742. The official name was something long and polite, full of words like proportional defense allocation and species-specific capability assessment. Everyone else just called it the Human Constraint Edict. In plain language, it said this: humans are not allowed to build, own, or operate armed warships. Period. We could have cargo ships. We could have passenger liners. We could even have little patrol boats with non-lethal deterrents, the kind of thing you would use to shoo away space debris. But warships? Absolutely not. Every other species in the compact had a fleet. The Turani had battlecruisers the size of small moons. The Kelveth had stealth frigates that could vanish from every sensor known to science. Even the Vilu, a race of peaceful coral beings, who had never fired a single shot in their entire history, were technically allowed to maintain a defensive flotilla. But not us. Not humans. The Conclave cited our disproportionate aggression metrics. They pointed to our history, our wars, our weapons. They used a phrase that I still remember, because it was printed on every news feed on Earth for a week straight: an evolutionary addiction to escalation. That one hurt. Not because it was cruel, but because it was not entirely wrong. We protested. Our diplomats argued for years. There were boycotts on colony worlds, and angry speeches in the halls of the conclave. But in the end, Earth's leaders made a calculation. The compact offered us terraforming technology, medical breakthroughs that added decades to the human lifespan, and trade routes that connected us to a galaxy of abundance. The price was our pride. They decided it was worth paying. I was in the last class of naval officers trained before the edict took effect. I stood on the observation deck of the Callisto shipyard and watched them dismantle the UEN Athena, the finest warship humanity had ever built. The cutting torches moved slowly across her hull like surgeons performing an autopsy. The crew stood in silence. The ship groaned as her structural spine was severed, a sound that I have never been able to forget. They did not just take our weapons that day, they took our teeth and told us to smile. So I became a freight captain. I spent the next several decades hauling grain and industrial polymers through a rough stretch of space called the Tessine Corridor, a place where the compact's laws were more suggestion than fact. My ship was the MV Cartwright, a battered old freighter with a crew of 12. Good people, loyal people, the kind of people who did not complain about the hand they had been dealt, even though they had every right to. Then the Draven came. I had heard rumors about them for years. A hive-minded predatory species from beyond the borders of compact space, expanding outward like a slow flood. The Conclave had dismissed the threat for as long as possible, the way large institutions always dismiss threats that have not yet arrived at their front door. By the time they stopped dismissing, the Draven had already overrun 2 frontier systems. Salaxis fell in 3 days. Bounterra lasted 5. The compact sent its finest fleets: the Turani, the Kelveth, the Suan, 3 of the most powerful military forces in known space. The Draven tore through them like they were made of paper. It was not even a contest. The compact fleets fought the way the compact did everything: by committee. Every engagement required authorization from at least 2 conclave representatives. Their rules of engagement were so cautious that some captains had standing orders to withdraw if the enemy outnumbered them by more than a small margin. They had built their military the way they had built their laws: beautiful, symmetrical, and completely useless when something ugly showed up. The conclave sent a galaxy-wide distress call. Every species was asked to contribute, but for humans, the message was painfully specific. Human civilian vessels may volunteer for evacuation and supply logistics. No armed human vessels are authorized per Resolution 7742. My engineer, Rena Okafor, threw her wrench across the cargo bay when she heard that. They want us to carry their wounded, she said, but not fight for our own survival. I did not say anything. I was too busy reading a second message that had arrived on a very old, very encrypted channel. It used human military codes that had not been active in decades. The sender was someone I thought was dead, Admiral Yuki Tanaka, the last commander of the old United Earth Navy. She was 89 years old, and she was about to change everything. Her message contained only two things: a set of coordinates in the Vanta expanse, a dead region of space that nobody visited, and a single word: come. I went. What I found inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the middle of nowhere was something that made my heart stop and then start again, beating harder than it had in years. 47 warships. Not old relics dragged out of storage, new ships. Built in secret over the course of 40 years by a covert program codenamed Prometheus, funded through channels that did not officially exist, crewed by skeleton teams of retired officers, and their children, and their children's children. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 60 years of suppression had done something that the Conclave never anticipated. It had forced human engineers to innovate without the safety net of compact technology. These vessels were ugly by galactic standards. Asymmetric, brutal. They did not use the elegant plasma arrays that every compact species relied on. Instead, they carried kinetic rail systems, weapons that hurled slugs of dense metal at tremendous speed. Their armor was not designed to absorb damage gracefully. It was designed to shed and detonate on impact, turning the ship's own skin into a weapon, and at the heart of each vessel was an AI-integrated combat core, a system that thought at machine speed, but was guided by human instinct. Every other species in the galaxy considered that kind of integration an abomination. Humans considered it an advantage. Admiral Tanaka spoke to us over a ship-wide channel. Her voice was thin with age but steady with purpose. The edict did not stop us, she said. It simply made sure that when we finally built again, we built without limits. No compact safety standards. No engagement protocols, no rules of symmetry. They thought they put us on a leash. But a leash only teaches a dog to bite what it can reach. Take the leash away, and you do not get a dog anymore. You get a wolf. The Battle of Tessin Gate is what the historians will call it. I was on the bridge of the UEN Fenrir when we dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the flank of the largest battle the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. The Draven swarm numbered over 800 bioorganic warships, a wall of living vessels pushing toward the Compact's core worlds. The combined Compact defense fleet, roughly 300 ships, had formed a rigid line in their path. They were fighting bravely. They were also losing. We were 47 ships. No conclave authorization. No communication with the Compact fleet. We simply appeared. Our opening move was something the galaxy had never witnessed. Every Compact species used plasma-based weaponry, and every species in the galaxy had designed their defenses around that assumption, including the Draven. Their bioorganic hulls were evolved to dissipate energy, to absorb heat and radiation like a sponge absorbs water. So we did not give them energy. We gave them metal. Waves of tungsten slugs crossed the distance between our ships and theirs at speeds that turned each one into a bolt of pure momentum. The Draven armor, so brilliantly evolved to resist fire, had no answer for a physical impact of that magnitude. Their ships cracked open like eggs. You can adapt to resist heat. You cannot adapt to resist a mountain. The Compact fleet watched in confusion as we fought. Our ships did not move in formation. There were no neat lines, no symmetrical patterns, no coordinated volleys. To the Tarani admiral watching from his flagship, it must have looked like madness. Each human ship moved independently, its AI core making thousands of calculations per second, while its human captain made the decisions that no machine could. The gut-level, instinctive choices born from a species that had been fighting since before it learned to speak. The Draven could not adapt. Their hive mind was designed to counter predictable behavior, to find patterns and exploit them. But there were no patterns. Every human ship was a different kind of problem, and the swarm could not solve 47 different problems at once. When we identified the Hive Queen ship at the center of the swarm, 3 of our destroyers did something that the compact would later describe as incomprehensible. They accelerated to full speed and drove themselves directly into the Queen ship, detonating their reactors on impact. The crews had already evacuated to escape pods. The blast was enormous. It severed the hive mind link that held the swarm together, and 800 coordinated predators became 800 confused animals. After that, it was over quickly. Not cleanly, not painlessly. We lost 28 ships that day. Good ships with good crews. But when the silence finally came, there were no Draven left in the Tessinae corridor. The open communication channel was quiet for nearly 2 minutes after the last enemy vessel went dark. Then a Turani admiral broke the silence. His voice carried a tone I had never heard from a Turani before. It was fear. "How long have you had these?" I did not answer. 1 week later, the conclave convened an emergency session. Half of them wanted to punish us. The other half owed us their lives. The debate raged until the eldest rose to speak. Vareth Sol, of the Cathani, the most ancient member of the conclave, a being who had not spoken publicly in over a century. What Vareth Sol said changed everything. The edict, the old one admitted, was never about protecting the galaxy from human aggression. It was about protecting the galaxy from human capability. When the Cathani first studied humanity, they ran projections. Every single model produced the same result. If humans were allowed to develop their military technology at their natural pace, within 200 years, they would possess the most powerful fleet in existence. Not because humans were smarter or stronger, but because every other species in the compact eventually reached a point where their psychology told them, "This is enough." Humans never reached that point. Humans always asked the same question: what if we made it bigger, faster, more effective? There was no ceiling. There was no plateau. There was only upward, forever. The edict was designed to keep humanity at the bottom of the military hierarchy permanently. It was not a safety measure. It was a containment protocol. The conclave voted to repeal Resolution 7742 that same day. Not out of gratitude. Out of mathematics. Because those 47 ships were what humanity built in secret, in an asteroid, with no funding and no resources. Every diplomat in that chamber was doing the same calculation in their head. What happens when humans build openly, with the full resources of their civilization behind them? They already knew the answer. That was why they looked so afraid. I get asked sometimes why humans fight the way we do. I have a simple answer, and I have given it so many times that it feels worn smooth like a river stone. We do not fight to win. We fight because something in us, something older than language, older than fire, older than memory itself, refuses to accept defeat. You can ban our ships, you can take our weapons, you can put us in a box and tell us to be grateful for the air, but you cannot make us stop. That is not a warning. That is simply what we are. And now the whole galaxy knows it.